Good evening. This is the May 22nd meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, Chair of the CAC. Our Vice Chair is Naj Daniels. Before I give the Chair's report, I'd like to welcome Amy Sion, who is the new clerk of the Transportation Authority, and ask her to do a roll call to ensure we have quorum, and then read an announcement about public comment.
Hello, everyone. Click the star. There you go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so CAC members, when I call your name, please say present to ensure a quorum. Member Bars absent. Member Chen present. Chen present. Vice Chair Daniels. Vice Chair Daniels absent. Member Davidson absent. Member Ford
present.
Member Kim
present.
Member Levine
Present.
Member Margarita present. Member Milford Rosales
Sorry.
Present.
Member Ortega
present.
Chair Siegel
Siegel present.
Chair Siegel, we have quorum. And I shall also make a public announcement now. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or calling the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant to make public comment on an item when the item is called. Members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak could use the raise hand feature or dial star 9. You press star 9 again, or you will be removed from the Zoom. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press star 6 or the unmute button. The live operator will advise you. You will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you so much and welcome. That puts us on item 2, which is the Chair's report, and this is an information item. CAC members have received a link to the Executive Director's report, which was presented at yesterday's board meeting. It is available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. I wanted to highlight a few items from the report. Folks tracking the state's finances will know that the state is facing some significant budget challenges for this coming year. I wanted to share a bit of good news from the Governor's May Revise released on May 10th, which preserves most of the transportation funding in the budget, including AB 102 and SB 125 funds, transit funding intended to support operators facing deficits this year. This would preserve this statewide, including $1.1 billion slated for Bay Area operators. This is critical bridge funding for transit, providing time for the region to find a more stable source of funding, such as SB 1031, which we will be discussing later on the agenda tonight for item 11. Speaking of new revenue sources, Caltrans is launching a 6-month pilot program in June, which will evaluate charging drivers based on the number of miles they drive as a potential replacement for California's gas tax, which is becoming a less robust funding source as electric vehicles become more prevalent. The program, called the California Road Charge, is seeking volunteers who will earn up to $400 for agreeing to have their mileage recorded. Ultimately, the state legislature will have to approve a road user charge. See www.caroadcharge.com for more details. At a more local level, I'd like to flag a public engagement opportunity related to the District 2 safety study requested by Commissioner Stephanie and funded through the neighborhood program. The study aims to design and implement quick build treatments for 6 locations throughout the district that prioritize vulnerable travelers such as seniors and children. The purpose of this first outreach round is to collect The purpose of this first outreach round is to collect community input on priority locations to receive safety improvements. The study team has launched an online survey and will hold pop-up engagement events throughout the months of May and June, including one at the Presidio Branch Library on Thursday, May 30th from 12 to 2 p.m. There will also be a virtual town hall on Thursday, June 13th. Take the survey and find dates and times for more events at sfcta.org/D2safety. Meeting management notes. When I call on you to speak, press the red star sticker on the base of the microphone to turn it on. A red light below the mouthpiece indicates that the microphone is on. Kindly turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. CAC members, please be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you. Please limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
Checking for remote public comments. There's no remote public comment.
Great, thank you so much. That puts us on the consent agenda. Items 3 through 5 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present, but is available to answer questions. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the consent agenda, which includes tonight the approval of the minutes, an internal accounting report, investment report, and debt expenditure report for the 9 months ending March 31st, 2024, and the state and federal legislation update information item. Not seeing any questions or comments from members. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the consent agenda? Not seeing anyone. Is there a remote public comment on the consent agenda?
Checking for remote public comment on the consent agenda. There's no remote public comment.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, item 3 on the consent agenda?
On the motion to approve the minutes, item 3 on the consent agenda, member Bars absent. Member Chen,
Chen, yeah, aye.
Chen, aye. Vice Chair Daniels absent. Member Davidson absent. Member Ford,
Aye.
Member Kim, aye.
Aye.
I apologize. Okay. Member Levine,
Aye.
aye. Member Margarita,
aye.
aye. Member Milford Rosales,
Milford Rosales, aye.
aye. Member Ortega,
Ortega, aye.
aye. Chair Siegel,
Siegel, aye.
Chair, we have 7 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Thank you so much. That puts us on item 6, which is to adopt a motion of support to adopt the 2023 Prop L 5-year prioritization programs for Mission Bay ferry landings and transformative freeway and major street projects, and amend the Prop L strategic plan baseline. And this is an action item. And Amelia Wally, program analyst, is here to present this item.
Okay. Good evening, CAC members. My name is Amelia Wally. I'm a program analyst here at the TA, and tonight I will be presenting 2 5-year prioritization program recommendations for your consideration: Mission Bay Ferry Landing and Transformative Freeway and Major Streets. As a reminder, the expenditure plan approved by the voters requires development and board approval of 5-year prioritization programs or 5 YPPs as prerequisite to allocation of funds from a given program, along with adoption of the Prop L strategic plan. To date, the board has approved 25 YPPs out of the 28 total programs. And here is a high-level look at the 2 programs we're recommending tonight, Mission Bay Ferry Landing and Transformative Freeways and Major Streets. And we'll get started with Mission Bay Ferry Landing. So the Mission Bay Ferry Landing is a new program in this expenditure plan. It's relatively small with $5 million over the 30 years of Prop L, and it's dedicated to this one project, the Mission Bay Ferry Landing, which would be a new ferry terminal in the southern waterfront in San Francisco and provide regional ferry service and access to Mission Bay and the surrounding areas. We are recommending to program $4.5 million in fiscal year 25 for construction of the terminal, which includes piles, floats, gangways, piers, canopies, and landside improvements. Because this is the only eligible project in the program, we do recommend significant advancement of funding, about $4 million over the baseline amount for this 5-year period. The last thing I'll note here is that this month, the Port and WIDA have or are jointly applying for a US EPA Clean Ports grant that will round out the funding plan. In the event that the grant is not awarded, the port will request a 5 YPP amendment, and Prop L funds will instead fund a passenger float that will be used at an interim landing and eventually move to the final Mission Bay Ferry Landing site. Okay, and then next up for your consideration is the Transformative Freeways and Major Streets 5 YPP. And this is also a new program in Prop L. It's heavily equity focused. It arose during the reauthorization engagement process where we heard concerns about equity in the context of these major roadway projects. This program also allows us to tap into state and other local reconnecting communities grants. In this 5-year period, we are recommending programming of $601,000 for the Fillmore Geary Underpass Community Planning Study, which has a concurrent allocation request you'll hear about in the next item. And our Deputy Director for the Planning, Rachel Hyatt, will go into those details. But I will say it's exactly the type of project that this program is intended to fund. We're also recommending 2 placeholders, which could fund recommendations from the Fillmore Geary study or planning and project development for projects consistent with the San Francisco Transportation Plan, SFTP 2050 or 2050 plus, Connect SF, or the Streets and Freeways study. So here's a breakdown of the anticipated leveraging for these 2 programs. Mission Bay Ferry Landing is very strong with anticipated leveraging of 94.5% as compared to the 90.7% outlined in the expenditure plan. For Transformative Freeway and Major Streets projects, Prop L is providing the 20% local match for a $2 million federal grant. So leveraging is currently over 78%. And we do expect that will improve over the 5 YPP period as those placeholders are allocated. And then this is a look at the recommended advancement of funds. We discussed the advancement in Mission Bay Ferry Landing on that slide, but the proposed Transformative Freeways projects do not require any advancement. So thank you so much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have someone from the port here to answer questions about that. Director Hyatt is here as well.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Member Levine?
I have a question. Thanks for the presentation, by the way. I have a question about the ferry terminal project, and what I understand here is that $4.5 million of Prop L funds will be used of the $74 million construction phase of the project, and the other funds, as far as I was reading on further, are all public funds. Or appear to be all publicly funded. Since this project is the landing is going to be right at UCSF, and I assume will serve them very substantially. Is UCSF contributing at all to this project? And if not, they should be.
UCSF, to my knowledge, is not contributing to the project. But Shannon, are you available to take this?
Hi. Yeah, the project is supported by many of the entities in the area. In terms of supporting us, providing support for going after these very crucial federal grant, for example. So we are getting support in in certain ways like that. But no, I don't have I can't tell you that they're supporting the project with a financial contribution.
Well, it just seems like they're getting a big boost out of this project without, I know it's been, kind of circumspect about the contributions of the entities in the neighborhood, but I would like to see something more specific. And they're a huge operation, and I believe they should be contributing to this project, and it should not all be publicly funded. Thank you.
Member Ford.
Hi. I might slightly respectfully, I don't know, add on or slightly rephrase where our colleague from District 2 was saying. It's also right next to the Chase Center, which I actually thought out more than UCSF, a public entity.
Yeah, I agree with
The Chase
that.
Center also seems suspicious. And I also noticed that the criteria for the Mission Bay Ferry Landing is coming in at a 20 in terms of community support, a little low at 3, the benefits to the disadvantage a little low, relative need coming in as a level 3 relative to the Geary project, which is coming in at a score of 27 with readiness, advantage, disadvantaged populations, community support, all showing up higher than the Mission Bay. And yeah, I guess, like, is this a project that just got started so long ago, it just has enough momentum to keep going? Like, do we still need it? What's the, if we were to look at this again fresh today without any sunk costs, how are people feeling about the Mission Bay Ferry Terminal now? And yeah, to phrase this as a question. And in that light, who is doing the actual ferry service to this terminal? Do we have a ferry service operator lined up? How frequent is the service? What do the tickets look like? Is that a financially viable service, given that our other ferries are not financially viable today? Does anyone have any light on those? Thank you.
Your point that, oh, somebody else speaking.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay. The project has been around for a very long time, and conditions have certainly changed. Life has totally changed. I will say that as far as the ferry operations, this is something more in WIDA's court, so I can't give you the details of the future operations plan. But WIDA is our very close partner, in delivering this project, and they won't have exclusive rights to operate. There could be other operators in addition to WIDA, but WIDA is definitely going to be the primary operator there. And
Can't hear you.
It's the computer setting.
I'll tell you the grant that was referenced in Amelia's presentation is a Clean Ports grant. And so Mission Bay Ferry Landing does play an important role in WIDA's plan to have a fully electrified fleet on the bay. And so this is very important for the of all the ferry service in the bay. And so it does have that function in addition to just its function there in that location, but it will be a contribute to the viability of an all-electric fleet on the bay. And as far as the disadvantaged communities, it's not only communities in the area, but it's also the communities that will have improved ferry service by the very fact of another ferry terminal on the bay.
Sorry, because you cut out for like the first half of your answer. I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat some of it. How does
Oh.
this terminal to the electrification goal?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was cutting out. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Amelia mentioned that there is a grant that WIDA and the port, well, it's the port mainly, but WIDA is our very close partner in all of this, are applying for the EPA Clean Ports Grant. And it is a grant to support the electrification components of Mission Bay Ferry Landing and actually the downtown ferry terminal. And so Mission Bay Ferry Landing, in addition to just its function as a ferry landing right there for that specific location, it is an important part of WIDA's plan to have a fully electrified fleet on the bay. And so Mission Bay Ferry Landing is a part of that, which is just another benefit to Mission Bay Ferry Landing existing, is that it will contribute to WIDA's goals of having the whole fleet for the entire San Francisco Bay be electrified, which has, I don't know if you heard the part about with the disadvantaged communities. It's not just the communities right there at Mission Bay Ferry Landing, but all the communities around the bay that will benefit from electrified service as well. But I think I started out saying that maybe you didn't hear this. Your question about the operations, that is WIDA. And so, but it's not exclusively WIDA. They will be the primary operator at Mission Bay Ferry Landing, but others can use Mission Bay Ferry Landing. WIDA will be the primary operator there. And so I couldn't give you the details of the service that will be at Mission Bay Ferry Landing because that is WIDA. But I could get it and we could get back to you or connect you with somebody at WIDA for more details on that.
Okay, just to make sure I understand, is WIDA the same as the Bay Area Water Emergency Transportation Authority?
Yes.
Yes. And they have committed that when this terminal opens, they're gonna serve it.
Yes.
Okay. Or I guess if this terminal opens, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from members? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment on the room in the room on item 6? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment?
Or remote public comments? There's no remote public comments.
May I have a motion and a second to approve item 6?
On the motion to approve item 6.
I think we need someone to motion.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I move the motion to approve item 6.
Moved by member Margarita, seconded by member Milford Rosales. Madam Clerk, would you please call a roll call vote? Thank you.
On the motion to approve item 6, member Bars, 4 is absent. Member Chen?
Chen, I.
Aye. Chen, aye. Vice Chair Daniels? Daniels absent. Member Davidson?
Davidson, aye.
Davidson, aye. Member Ford?
Ford abstain.
Ford abstain. Member Kim?
Kim, I.
Kim, aye. Member Levine?
Levine abstain.
Levine abstain. Member Margarita? Member Margarita, aye. Margarita, aye. Member Milford Rosales,
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, aye. Member Ortega,
Ortega, I.
Ortega, aye. Chair Siegel,
Siegel, I.
Siegel, aye. Chair, we have 7 ayes, the minutes, oh, sorry. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. That puts us on item 7, which is to adopt a motion of support to appropriate $601,000 in Prop L funds with conditions and approve memorandum of agreements with the San Francisco Planning Department in an amount not to exceed $150,000 and with the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency in an amount not to exceed $190,000 for the Fillmore Geary Underpass Community Planning Study. And this is an action item. And Rachel Hyatt, Deputy Director for Planning, is here to present this item.
Good evening, everyone. I know you'll let me know if you have trouble hearing me. Rachel Hyatt, the Deputy for Planning at SFCTA, and I believe I'm sharing my slides correctly. So this item has 2 things basically built into it. One is to request a Prop L appropriation from the Transformative Freeways category to support the Fillmore Geary Underpass Community Planning Study. And then at the same time, authorize the executive director to enter into interagency funding agreements with SFMTA and the SF Planning Department so that they can carry out their roles and responsibilities in supporting the study. So earlier this year, we were fortunate to receive from the Biden administration a $2 million grant from the pretty new Federal Reconnecting Communities Grant Program. And this program is meant to address situations where major roadway infrastructure has divided communities and allow communities to work with agencies together to re-envision those places where neighborhoods have been divided. So we were awarded this grant. The application was supported by the District 5 office and several neighborhood community groups who approached us, including, but not exclusively, the Japantown Task Force and the New Community Leadership Foundation, who supported the application. It will be a community-driven effort, which is the purpose, that's the intent of these grant programs, is to work with communities who were previously excluded from participating in the design of the roadways that affected their neighborhoods to re-envision the area. We, SFCTA, are the lead grant recipient. And we expect that this will be up to a 24-month planning process. The scope of the work includes not just looking at the transportation infrastructure, the underpass that goes underneath Geary and Fillmore between Laguna and Divisadero approximately, but also the roadway network surrounding and also the land uses surrounding, because in re-envisioning the area, there's a potential for open space, to be used differently and land use to connect across the Western Addition and Fillmore and Japantown neighborhoods. That's why the San Francisco Planning Department partnered with us in this application, and we also partner with SFMTA to help develop the engineering concepts and to ensure that the recommendations coming out at the end of this process are implementable and supported by the implementing agencies. The memorandum of agreement, which is also part of this action, would authorize us to contract with SF Planning to lead those land use related planning tasks and for SFMTA to support the engineering and concept evaluation. So there would be 2 different agency partnerships that we enter into. But most important would be the community partnerships that we enter into, which will also be compensated. They're not a subject of this action. They would be contracts that the SFCTA would enter into subsequently following a process to identify outreach partners as well as members of a community council. So this was the concept proposed in the grant application, that representatives from the neighborhoods that have been divided, Japantown, Western Addition, and Fillmore, would be able to form a council to advise us and the other public agencies and to, oh, I'm sorry, is there an audio problem or? It's okay? And to help reach the communities involved to engage in providing feedback throughout to identify various alternatives and possibilities for reimagining the area here, again, roughly bounded by Laguna and Divisadero, but not strictly. That'll be part of the planning process to identify sort of a complete way and a community-driven way to connect across Geary Boulevard. And we've set aside, so half of the budget is for community engagement and for community council involvement. I'm happy to answer any questions. This is a very exciting award that that we're pleased to see one of these key recommendations from the most recent 2022 long-range plan that identified this area as a reconnecting communities need move forward. And I expect that we'll be back before you as well, this body, throughout the planning process to seek your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members on this item? Not seeing any. I just wanted to say I'm as supportive of and excited about this project. I was wondering, I'm really happy to hear that there are community groups in the Fillmore and Japantown and Western Addition who will be key stakeholders in this study phase. I was wondering, would there be any consideration, or has there been any consideration of identifying communities who were displaced and are no longer in those community groups, so that they could also be participants in this and maybe even develop concepts for ways to bring them back if they're interested?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for asking that. That's one of the issues that we've been discussing as we've been sort of ahead of this, really formally launching this, been thinking about how to reach folks who have been displaced. So there's some ethnic and cultural groups that we're talking about here, right? Like, so the Black community in San Francisco who, has been displaced. How do we make sure that not just the remaining folks who are still there, but also representatives of this community who may have moved out to different areas are able to participate either on the community council or in outreach generally? And the same for Japanese communities and even Jewish communities who have also, we understand from the history, been displaced. So the qualification, if you will, for participating on the community council is not restricted to whether your group is solely exclusively based in one of these neighborhoods, but how much you have those ties and are able to voice the input from communities that were displaced and that still that have ties, right, to that history. So that is absolutely something that we are going to be seeking when we later this year promote and elicit interest in participating in the community council. And one of the things that we'll be looking for in seeking organizations or individuals to participate is how can you help us reach those folks so that they can also participate?
Great, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to hearing more updates on this project. Member Levine?
Just a quick question. I'm also very much in support of the project. Just wondering that the planning study is supposed to be finished in 2026. Do we have any projection about when the construction, the actual project will be completed?
Well, that will very much depend on the project, right? Because there's a whole spectrum of potential projects that could come out of this. And we're not presupposing that the recommendation will be to fill the underpass, because we know that that's not a viewpoint that the community writ large have sort of said that they want to be the outcome of this. It's not known whether that is going to be the recommendation. So we expect that we're going to be considering a whole range of improvements that could go from, say at one end, refilling the underpass, to all kinds of other things that may not be that construction intensive. So we're prepared with this grant funding to be able to tackle the most visionary, up to including, and let's say even more than, if there's something more than refilling the underpass. But I wouldn't say that we certainly don't go into this presuming that that would be the outcome, because we don't know that. But we are prepared with this funding to be able to handle the sort of engineering feasibility and conceptual engineering, and also funding and implementation pathway that would be associated with something as significant as, say, a fill of the underpass. Which is a very major construction project that would take a number of years.
Member Davidson?
Thanks for your comments. I'm curious if the Connecting Communities grant prioritizes connecting communities without cars. Is that the goal?
It does,
But
correct. Yes, that's correct. It aims to sort of correct for the harms that were caused by car-oriented roadway infrastructure.
So it's to rebalance for people, not cars.
Rebalance for people and for community vibrancy.
Great, thank you.
Member Ortega?
Yeah, just a quick question. I didn't realize how big the scope was. I guess how prepared the team was for the post engineering efforts, right? I know that there's a lot to be written out on the community input, but one of the questions I have, and it's like feasibilities of tunnels in this city in general. An option that I would be curious about, and obviously community input is far more important than my input here on this one, but is doing it like a tunnel system, so that way the surface level is of the community, can have whatever connection it needs, but then the road passageway for sort of connecting two halves of the city could still be maintained for commercial use at least. And I'm curious now if there's enough money for a tunnel project, because we talked a ton about filling in and how expensive that would be, but I'm curious the relative cost of a tunnel in comparison to a fill, because I actually imagine that a tunnel would be more expensive than a fill, given the amount of engineering infrastructure we'd have to put in place, and then potential relook at tunnel laws that have obviously changed since most of the tunnels were built in San Francisco. So that can be a emailed question, emailed answer. I'm fine with that. I would just love to have an understanding of cost, like variation, and it doesn't need to be precise, of tunnels versus other things, right?
Sure, and also I'm happy to, get you more information follow-up by email, but what I would say, I'm sure that this group has noticed that this is a very large budget for a planning study that is starting from the very beginning, right? It's over $2.5 million. And the reason for that is because we need those resources to be able to inform the engineering work. Because the infrastructure is so significant and because the whole purpose here is to ensure that we have the resources to address very visionary and bold ideas that could involve significant engineering and structural engineering. That's the kind of resources that we need. And we have those with this. And we do expect, we don't know exactly what, for example, tunnel idea that the community may want to look at to reconnect, but we do anticipate that there will be these big engineering ideas that we will need and want to look at. And this study provides the resources to be able to look at things of a significant nature like that. And the engineering sort of implementation task that we've anticipated here, that's where we will be able to and plan to do things like make sure the community understands the different costs, opportunities, potential impacts, the different trade-offs, as well as opportunities with really bold ideas such as the ones that you're mentioning.
If there are no other questions or comments from members, we can take public comment in the room.
Thank you. I look at this as unknowns. During the presentations that are going to be made in the planning, is link 21 going to be a consideration? Because link 21 is supposed to be the Gary Street subway that will begin at the eastern portion of San Francisco, go along Gary, and then wind up going down 19th Avenue to San Francisco State or Daly City BART. So what I'm concerned about is we're going to do all this planning, we're going to do something, and then 20 years from now or 30 years from now, we're going to go in there and tear it out again and do something else. So I would hope that link 21 is a consideration in all of this effort. And everything that I've read about it and trying to do research on this back to the planning department indicated I was wondering, well, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to be whatever the community comes up with. But from the planning department's documentation, it certainly seemed like this was going to be a real estate development project. And, they want to build up and upzone everything probably based on the planning department. So if it goes down that road, then I think we need to have the consideration of, well, where's the water going to come from? Where's the sewage going to come from? Because we're already in violation of sewage requirements with our combined system now that's contaminating the bay, and electricity, which is going to be all electrical, but that is fraught with a lot of implementation problems long term. So I hope that we take a comprehensive look at this and look at the bottom of the iceberg factors that are going to be involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on item 7?
Checking for remote public comments. There is no remote public comments.
Great. In that case, we can make a motion on item 7, and I think we can take it same house, same call if there are no objections, but no, we did someone.
There are 2 abstentions.
Oh, right, okay. Can I have a motion and a second to approve item 7?
I'll move adoption of the motion.
Member Levine, seconded by member Ortega. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
On the motion to approve item 7, member Bars absent, member Chen,
I.
Chen I, vice chair Daniels absent, member Davidson, Davidson I, member Ford,
Ford, aye.
Ford I, member Kim,
Kim, I.
Kim I, member Levine,
Levine, I.
Levine I, member Margarita,
Member Margarita, I.
Margarita I, member Milford Rosales,
Milford Rosales, I.
Milford Rosales I, member Ortega,
Ortega, aye.
Ortega I, Chair Siegel,
Siegel, aye.
Siegel I. Chair, we have 9 ayes, the motion is approved.
Thank you so much. That puts us on item 8, which is to adopt a motion of support to allocate $49 million in Prop L funds and $2.4 million in Prop AA funds with conditions for 11 requests. And this is an action item. I'd like to welcome Amelia Wally, Program Analyst, to kick off this item, followed by Nick Smith, Senior Transportation Planner, and then Damon Curtis, Project Manager with the SFMTA.
Good evening again, CAC members. Amelia Wally, Program Analyst here at the TA. We have 11 allocation requests to go through this evening, and I'll be presenting the first few, then I'll turn it over to my colleague Linda Beret, who will present on some of the SFMTA requests, and finally we'll hand it over to our colleague Nick Smith, who will present on the 2 school-related requests along with Damon from SFMTA. Okay. All right, so first up, we have a Prop L request from Public Works of $435,000 for a new asphalt utility truck. This is a truck used by the pothole crew, and the current truck, which is from 2006, has a heated bed that fails frequently, so the asphalt gets cold and becomes unusable. So this is meant to replace that. It's scheduled to be in service by the end of this calendar year. Moving on to public sidewalk and curb repair, another request from Public Works for $551,000 of Prop L funds. These funds will be used to repair damaged sidewalks, curbs, and gutters, typically damaged due to old age and heavy vehicles. There's a backlog of locations attached to your item materials. Those are identified through inspection by Public Works, along with 311 complaints, and Public Works estimates addressing about 200 of these on the backlog with these funds. And this project is expected to be open for use by June of 2025. Next, we have another Public Works request of $1.8 million of Prop L funds for the construction phase of their various locations pavement renovation number 68 project. This is Public Works standard repaving scope. It includes pavement renovation of 38 blocks, along with construction and retrofit of approximately 140 curb ramps, new sidewalk construction, and traffic control. You can find the list of proposed locations in your item materials. Those are in districts 1, 5, 7, 10, and 11. And this project is expected to be open for use by March of 2026. So moving right along to a couple of Prop AA requests, both from Public Works as well. First is a request for $2.36 million for construction of their 8th Street, Clay Street, and Leavenworth Street pavement renovation project. So on the last slide, this is their standard repaving scope. It includes pavement renovation of 29 blocks, construction and retrofit of approximately 31 curb ramps, and new sidewalk construction. And this one's expected to be open for use in September of 2026. And for the last Prop AA request tonight, we have $100,000 requested by Public Works for the design of the Japantown Buchanan Mall improvements. The requested funds will leverage a state grant and revitalize the space through pedestrian safety and artistic and landscaping improvements, such as repaved walkways, more culturally relevant plants, pedestrian lighting, and ADA compliant improvements to curb ramps and seating. The project will also use new energy and water efficient technologies to light the plaza and maintain the fountains. And it's expected to be open for use December of 2026. And now I will hand it over to Linda Murray to present on for Prop L request from SFMTA.
Amelia, can you hear me? Okay, great. So the first of the vehicles that I'm going to go over is from SFMTA's mention for 32 million for their 40 feet hybrid motor coach replacement project. So these vehicles were purchased with Prop K funds back in 2013. The original scope of work was to replace the 94 vehicles with zero emission vehicles, but due to COVID impacts, facility progress is delayed and the MTA will purchase additional hybrid vehicles. So the intention is to conditionally accept the vehicles 2 years from start of procurement to help lower the average age of the bus fleet. So by December 2026, MTA plans to have put all the vehicles into service. So MTA also intends to purchase the vehicles with the bus original equipment manufacturer as it meets their service demands and topography. They anticipate to have better fuel consumption, reliable, comfortable, and a safer riding experience to all SF riders. We do have a few special conditions on this request and the next request for the funds for vehicle procurements. The first condition is a waiver to the Prop L policy that at the time of allocation that all funding for the project phase is committed to the project. And the project funding has nearly 72.8 million in the planned federal transit formula funds that MTC anticipates it will program by December 2024. And the other special condition is that MTA commits to maintaining the vehicles in a state of good repair per the FTA guidelines. Next slide. So this request is for 10 million for MTA's 60 feet and 40 feet battery electric bus procurement replacing motor coaches project. The battery electric buses and the required accessories will be procured from the manufacturers Gillig and New Flyer. The 60 feet battery electric buses will be stored and operated out of the Islayas Creek bus facility, and the 40 feet battery electric buses will be stored and operated out of the Woods bus facility. So this procurement aligns with MTA's zero emission bus rollout plan and is an important step to replace their diesel hybrid buses with battery electric buses and achieve a complete zero emissions fleet as highlighted in the rollout plan. An evaluation of the suitability of the battery electric buses for MTA will be conducted, which will allow them to develop future procurement strategies for battery electric buses at scale. The project scope does not include the charging infrastructure for the 18 battery electric buses, which will need to be installed prior to their arrival. The current request will allow MTA to issue the notice to proceed to the bus manufacturers to begin the construction of the battery buses. So the 40 feet battery electric bus pilot program evaluation has concluded and a program evaluation report is being developed. This will be available in July. MTA has determined that all buses tested can meet the MTA's performance requirements, but that reliability of the battery buses is expected to improve in the next generation of the buses. Similar to the prior request, we have a few special conditions. The first is a waiver to the Prop L policy that at the time of allocation, all funding for the project phase is committed to the project. The project funding plan has nearly 18.4 million in planned federal transit formula funds that MTC anticipates it will program by December 2024. And the other special condition is that MTA commits to maintaining the vehicles in a state of good repair for FTA guidelines. Next slide, please. Okay, and this Prop L request is from MTA again for 1.8 million in additional funds for their traffic signal upgrade contract 36. The 5 locations are at Folsom and 19th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd Street, and at Golf, 8, and Market Street. So FMTA will add these 5 locations through a change order to the contract 36 construction contract in order to expedite delivery and avoid the potential loss of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities grant funds for the signal upgrades on Folsom and to address continuing the right angle collisions occurring at Golf, 8, and Market. There are special conditions to this request as well. This includes an amendment to the Prop L traffic sign and signal maintenance 5YPP to reprogram 1.75 million from the traffic signal upgrade contract 35 to the project. The MTA is requesting these Prop L funds to expedite delivery of the traffic signal upgrades at the 5 locations by delivering the scope through contract 36, which is proceeding prior to contract 35 construction. Also, this will allow the cost savings from the Prop K funded contract 34, which was completed under budget, to be used for the same scope of signal modifications to contract 36. Slide, thank you. So this request is the Central Barcadero Safety, and this is again from MTA for $200,000 for the design of this project. The Prop L funds for the design phase of this project will help provide a local match for a 6.3 million OBAG 3 construction grant award and a 1 million in Prop AA funds that were programmed by the T board. The project will extend a two-way protected class 4 waterside bikeway from Folsom Street to Brandon Street, upgrade existing quick-built bikeway buffer areas between Broadway and Mission, modify traffic signals and shorten pedestrian roadway crossings at the 4 intersections, and add a variable message sign for the northbound drivers. The project will also add sidewalk extensions, curb route upgrades, and other measures for the improved pedestrian safety and accessibility at the 4 intersections. Also, this project will design and construct a variable message streets to support real-time wayfinding, better parking information, and special event messaging for drivers. And so I'm going to pass it along to my colleague Nick Smith, and he's going to present the last 2 Prop L allocation requests.
Good evening. These 2 requests are for separate school programs by SFMTA. The first of these programs is for Safe Routes to School Non-Infrastructure. It is a request for $466,000 in Prop L funds. These are local match funds to a federal One Bay Area Cycle 3 grant program. The SFCTA board programmed $7 million in One Bay Area grant funds to the program. So these funds would provide the local match for fiscal years 24 and 25. So this Safe Routes to School Non-Infrastructure program will accomplish tasks including in-school education, related safety and transportation choices, skill building classes like weekend bike classes, walking school buses and bike trains, and will also help coordinate between SFUSD and SFMTA to streamline the responses in responding to traffic and safety needs around schools. And the schools that are eligible are all SFUSD public schools in San Francisco. And next slide. So this next separate program is for SFMTA's school traffic calming program. This is a Prop L request for $2 million for this program. So this program covers all K through 12 public and private schools in San Francisco. And it consists of the school walk audit program and a new proactive daylighting program. And it's a continuation or an evolution of the Prop K funded schools engineering program. With this program, SFMTA will conduct 10 school walk audits per year. While the proactive daylighting program will implement daylighting at 50 intersections near schools, which is coordinated with the larger citywide AB 413 daylighting effort. For the first year of this allocation, those 50 proactive daylighting intersections will be focused on those 10 schools where walk audits are held. So again, this request is for $10 million or $2 million at 10 schools. So that works out to about $22,000 per school to conduct a walk audit and finalize the recommendations that come out of that walk audit. And it works out to about $178,000 in improvements per school, which will fund about 10 improvements per school, depending on what is recommended in the walk audit. And so we have Damon Curtis, who is the SFMTA Traffic Calming Program Manager here to present the walk audit guidelines. And presentation of these guidelines to the SFCTA board is a condition of school allocation approval. So we do have the slides in our deck. Do we want to have Damon present or go to those slides?
They're hidden, so Damon.
Okay, Damon, are you able to
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
You'll have to control the slides, however.
Okay.
Start talking.
You can go ahead while we share the slides.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Chair Siegel, committee members. I'm Damon Curtis, Traffic Calming Program Manager at SFMTA. And as Nick mentioned, just a part of this allocation request was the creation of a guidelines document. And the purpose of that document was just to outline the process, give the public as well as decision makers more information about how walk audits occur, how the schools are selected, et cetera. I don't know if the slides are up. I can only see myself right now.
We're getting them up.
Okay. So it's only 2 slides, and luckily, because I'm battling a head cold, I will just launch right in because I've got copies of them in front of me. The first thing I want to emphasize is that, and that the guidelines do emphasize, is that walk audits are a collaborative effort between MTA and the school communities in order to identify transportation safety needs and address those needs around schools. The guidelines include an outline of the process and the criteria for prioritizing schools each year, as well as a description of how walk audits are conducted and an expected timeline. Next slide. The key criteria we will use in selecting schools each year will include collision history within a quarter mile of each school, enrollment data that we get from the school district, and the number of students residing within walking distance of schools, which I believe is defined as a half a mile from each school. And finally, the timeline will generally follow the steps shown here. In year 1, we will begin by compiling the data, updating our prioritization. Then with that, we'll use that information to select the 10 schools each year. We will actually conduct the audits, and those will happen typically in the spring when the weather is better. We will also begin the proactive daylighting component that Nick spoke of in that first year. In year 2, we'll finalize the reports. So each walk audit produces a full-on report that we compile, that we prepare, that includes all of the recommendations that come out of that walk audit. Once those reports are finalized, we'll begin implementing the recommendations that came out of those audits. We'll complete proactive daylighting in year 2. And then in year 3, we'll finish implementation of the other more involved identified improvements that include things like traffic calming that require a more strenuous sort of review and approval process. I think, and finally, it's not shown on the slides, but we are also creating a website. So it'll be a school walk audits website. And hopefully it'll be live in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're working with our IT folks right now. And that website will include the walk audit, the guidelines themselves. It will also include a compilation of all of the recommended improvements from previous years when we've done walk audits, as well as all years in the future. And so those previous years would include the school's engineering Prop K program, the previous iteration of this program that Nick spoke of. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any comments or questions from members? Member Margarita?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a quick question with regards to, before you explain the criteria, I was wondering, okay, what criteria are you going to be utilizing to choose the different schools? And so my question is, with regards to enrollment data, can you tell me a little, or tell us a little bit more about that criteria? Does that mean, like, there's more absences in that school than they don't qualify? Like, what enrollment data are you looking at as far as for the criteria? Oops, sorry about that. I think I muted myself. So with regards to the enrollment criteria, what does that mean? Does it mean that if there's low enrollment at that school, then they're going to be eliminated? They don't qualify? If you can tell us a little bit more about that. Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you. So the enrollment data we get directly from the school district. It's whatever their official enrollment data is. I believe they finalize, they actually, I believe, collect enrollment data throughout the school year. The first tranche of data that's available happens in, I believe, October. And so we'll use that data that comes out in October to build our prioritization. And schools that have lower enrollment, I mean, you know, it's sort of a ranking system. It doesn't necessarily mean that you won't qualify, because there are also other components, right? I mean, there's the collisions that might occur within a quarter mile of the school. Those we look at and weight more heavily than the enrollment data itself. And there's also the component of the schools that, or the number of children that live within a walking distance of the school, because the whole idea is to make improvements, safety improvements, so that kids will walk to school and not have to be driven. So if they're already within that radius, but for one reason or another, they're not walking, that is what we're trying to address.
So my follow-up comment, I guess, would be, because I volunteer at different community-based organizations, and so unfortunately, sometimes no-income students, you know, when they come to the youth group, etc., I talk to them about why did they miss school? You know, what's going on? Why are they missing school? So I just want you all to take into consideration. Sometimes, unfortunately, students from low-income backgrounds do miss school because they have to go to work, right? It's not a popular decision. I wish I could have money so that I could pay for, you know, their families' rent, etc. But sometimes students have to miss school because they're going to work, etc. And so when you're looking at the enrollment data of schools, if you can take into consideration maybe combination of low income and no income populations versus enrollment data, multilingual populations, multi-ethnic populations, versus just the enrollment data, so that different populations don't get missed. Versus, because, you know, you might have the situation where you have high enrollment data. I see private schools are listed there. And so I don't want populations to be missed from different schools. So that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Levine?
Just a couple of quick questions around the vehicle procurements. I was just wondering, I know the 60 and 40-foot battery electric buses are going to be manufactured by Gillig and New Flyer. Who is going to be making the 40-foot hybrid motor coaches?
Hi, I'm gonna ask an MTA to respond to this question. Gary,
Hi there. This is Gary Chang with SFMTA. Can you folks hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Yes. Hi, good evening. For the hybrid 94 purchases, we are currently now working with the manufacturer's New Flyer at this point.
Okay, and when will the first of the new vehicles be actually on the road and in service?
Yes, so currently based on our planning schedule there, the first vehicle should be arriving in San Francisco in about April or May of next year. And then we will continue taking buses delivery all the way out to the month of September of 2025, 2026. Sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Member Milford Rosales?
Hello, so I wanted to follow up on the central Embarcadero safety design, and ask, are there I guess, I know that there's, an upcoming plan for the port, of San Francisco to raise that whole area and potentially re-envision what everything looks like, on the Embarcadero right now. Has there been coordination, on the, I guess, on that front, both on timelines and efforts, to ensure that we're not maybe spending a bunch of money to do something that we take apart right away? And following up, are there plans to potentially expand the two-way bike lane even further than what is currently proposed to?
I'm gonna invite an MTA to respond.
Hi, yes, this is Casey Hildreth, Embarcadero Enhancement Program Manager and Project Manager for Central Embarcadero. Good question. Short answer is yes. So I've been directly involved with some of the ports planning and some of our coordination at the planning division within the MTA around much longer term plans for changes and investments to the Embarcadero corridor. You know, a lot of those plans are looking at like 100-year time frame. So while there may be some investments in the next couple of decades, we've coordinated at a certain level to know that this investment, Central Embarcadero, makes a lot of sense, and it doesn't, would not be ripped up in the near term based on those longer term plans. And in fact, we are trying to help set the stage a little bit with some of our design and how we're fitting the bikeway into the corridor by narrowing the center promenade. We sort of talk through with port staff how that contributes and offers flexibility for adaptation projects in the future along the waterfront. So we do see it as complementary, even though, maybe 50 years from now, there might be something different there. In the near term, we're confident this is a smart investment. I believe you had a second question about extending in the future. The short answer is yes. So this project, we are focused extending south as far as possible, given I think the level of coordination that we have and level of confidence that we have in the planning. There's a large pinch point at the very tail end as we get closer to the ballpark with one of the piers, and that segment we're actually hoping and banking on a bit other projects that come out of the resiliency program that may include moving those piers or other changes. So we're sort of stopping where we have a higher confidence level and waiting for those future projects in order to continue south. On the northern end, our Embarcadero Enhancement Program, back when we had our planning phase, recognized that the two-way bikeway north of Broadway doesn't really fit under current conditions. And so we are really looking towards additional planning to understand what's feasible, what makes sense, given that there are these larger questions about what the future of the corridor looks like.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that the coordination is going well. I would like to add that particularly riding southbound, but in general, riding north of the two-way bikeway, it often gets unrideable during high traffic weekend levels with the amount of door zone action going on, vendors in the bike lane, and then riding southbound, you've got all the cross streets as well that have different turn regulations. So extending the two-way further and protecting it seems like a really terrific potential thing to do in that area.
Thank you.
Member Kim.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. Safe route to school non-infrastructure. Total budget is 4 million, little over 4 million, and then it shows 2.5 million goes to contractor. So I have a question: how many contractors we have, and also who's current contractors?
We have someone from MTA who can address that. Is that Ben? Great.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. I'm Ben Fraser, Transportation Planner, SFCTA, and San Francisco Safe Routes to Schools Program Coordinator. So yes, a lot of the on the ground action and implementation is covered by a series of contractors that we have. Right now, the prime contractor on the program is the San Francisco Bicycle Coalition, but we also have Walk SF Transit Riders, and we have our communications consultant Contigo, and we also have an evaluation consultant Cause Impacts. So we have a number of consultants on board to help kind of round out different sort of specialty areas for, one for each of the modes. We're trying to represent walking, biking, rolling, and transit, and then one to help us market and communicate with a lot of varying audiences, and then an evaluation to kind of help us see how things are going, how we're doing, how we're working towards mode shift, and then how are our programs and activities working.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Last year I saw some newspaper and one person, her name is Janice Lee. She hired by Bicycle Collision and then she lobbied for Bicycle Collision. But SFMTA grant money to Bicycle Collision and then Bicycle Collision hire somebody to lobby themselves. I don't know. I'm just curious. Is appropriate or is ethically is okay?
What I will say on that is there are two different institutions. There's the Bicycle Coalition Education Fund, and they are solely focused on the educational programming. They like that's where the Safer to School program is housed. That's where the bicycle education classes are housed, and no advocacy or anything like that can happen out of that aspect of it. It has different bank accounts, it has a different board of directors. And so it is kind of independent from the advocacy side of the Bicycle Coalition. So there is that separation there.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions about the BEB procurement. I wanted to clarify, it sounds like the second procurement is still an evaluation period. Please let me know if that's not correct. I wanted to understand what we anticipate the useful life of these vehicles will be, and whether we'll be continuing to use the vehicles from the first BEB procurement. Gary, are you able to respond to that?
Good evening. This
Or
is Bob, and can you guys hear me? Yeah, so I can answer that question. This is not part of the evaluation. So this is not a part of the pilot program. These are actually replacement vehicles for hybrid buses that are retiring. And the life of the bus is 12 years, and we are going to continue to operate the original 12 pilot vehicle that we procured as well for the life of the bus, which is 12 years.
That's great. Are they all compatible with the same like charging infrastructure and all of that?
Yeah, all of our buses, we have buses from 4 different manufacturers. With this new Gillick procurement, we'll have buses from 5 different manufacturers, and they all work on the same chargers.
And do you anticipate that you'll be purchasing additional vehicles from both manufacturers after this, or choosing one?
I think we'll probably continue to purchase from multiple manufacturers. Our last procurement was all from one manufacturer, New Flyer, and we want to make sure that there's healthy competition and that we continue to get support. So we were going to make sure that we procure buses from multiple manufacturers going forward.
I see. Okay, thank you so much. And I did also have one more question about the safe routes to school. I appreciate the proactive daylighting. I was wondering if there might be future consideration of other proactive improvements, infrastructure improvements, like make it safer to cross the street, like raised crosswalks and bulb outs. Is there any consideration of including that in the scope of the program?
I think what I can say is that the way the program is currently structured, proactive daylighting is the only proactive component of it. However, as part of the walk audits themselves, the improvements that come out of those will include traffic calming improvements like raised crosswalks or speed humps along adjacent to schools, and other signal timing changes. I mean, it really runs the gamut. I mean, we have to get out there and perform the walks to see what issues exist. But we have a full range of improvements that we could potentially implement at each school site. It won't be on a quote unquote proactive basis, however. I mean, it has to come out of a walk audit.
Okay, thank you so much. Member Margarita, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you so much again. I know before it was more of a comment, but I guess it's sitting with me in a certain way, so I'm going to push a little bit more. Would you all be willing to change the criteria instead of listing enrollment data, and instead include the criteria to be a mix of a population so that there's representation of low income, no income, multi-ethnic, multilingual populations, including children, youth, and families of all ages, as part of the criteria to be a part of this school traffic calming program? Thank you.
So I'll say, I mean, the enrollment data we get is from the school district. So we take it as it comes, right? We don't have any control over what they prioritize or how they compile that data. But I will say that, I mean, what I presented was just an outline. If you look at the guidelines as a whole, it's a 4-page document, and it includes, in terms of the criteria or the way we select a school, the 10 schools each year. Once we take the enrollment data, take the collision data, take the kids that walk that are within a certain radius of the school that presumably could walk to school, that gives us a preliminary list. That list is then refined by internal conversations with our other program partners to find out what other infrastructure projects may be happening. We take a look at what improvements may have happened at this school already in the past 6 to 18 months. And to the extent possible, and let me find the exact language here. I mean, we try to, I'll just quote it. It's like, where applicable, consideration may be given to schools within equity priority communities or California communities of concern. So we know where these schools are. We know where those communities exist. And so we can, when it comes down to choosing those final 10 schools, safety is the #1 priority. But as we, move down the list in order to come up with the 10 schools, because it's surprisingly difficult, honestly, because the MTA is doing a lot of work, Public Works is doing a lot of work out there in the streets. So finding 10 schools where nothing has happened in the last couple of years is not as easy as it might sound. But so we will overlay those communities of concern and the priority equity communities over our map of schools that we select preliminarily to maybe make those final decisions about a school that's on the borderline, or 2 schools that sort of have the same ranking, but we want to pick one. We have to pick one over the other. So that's where those other equity considerations will come into play. In addition, we've got 10 schools each year. We have 11 supervisor districts, right? So obviously everyone is not going to get a school each year. However, we want to spread that out as much as possible as well. We have to provide, geographic equity as well as, the other socioeconomic equity components as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing any other questions or comments from members. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Yes, thank you. Since there's multiple items, regarding sidewalks, I'll say my statement again, they crack And there's an example at 24th in Chattanooga where the work was done at the early part of the year, and there's already cracks in the sidewalk. MTA has made the decision to go to all battery electric buses, whereas VTAs, Amtrans, and other regional areas have split their bet and gone to fuel cell, which means hydrogen. And then there's different types of hydrogen, everything from green hydrogen to black hydrogen on that. Regardless of what way we go, my main concern is the workforce. And the reason is, this is a chart that is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and private investments from invest.gov. And what it really says is that there's an estimated 3.8 million manufacturing jobs that were created from 2024 to 2023. The problem is that you're going to have 2.8 million jobs for retirements, and retirements is really 12,000 people a day turning 65. So that creates a vacuum there. They're estimating that by 2033, you're going to have over 50% of the positions available open in manufacturing. Well, if you transfer that over to, it's going to be the same skill sets and all, to maintain these vehicles and buses. So the question is, Muni established a program years ago with City College to get people trained up to take these jobs. Well, the question is, how effective has that been? And are they preparing for a decade away from now? Because you're going to have new technology involved with the buses. So, you know, that's my real concern, regardless of which way we go, whether we go with batteries or hybrid or diesel.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, but look at all the items you got. See, you know, always cut me off for 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Checking public comments.
Just in person.
I think there's still another one in person.
Good evening.
Push the red star. There you go.
Hi, good evening. Brian Wu, Senior Traffic Engineer, SFCTA. I just wanted to comment on a couple items and the questions that the CAC had. As the original father of the proactive school traffic calming program from 2016, dating myself now. The reason why Mr. Curtis has trouble finding schools that haven't been touched is because we actually have, thanks to your support, a proactive traffic calming program that specifically installed traffic speed humps and speed cushions directly in front of the schools. And the specific criteria that we used back at that time was specifically the product of two things, which was the school enrollment provided by either the Department of Education or by the school district. That was just the enrollment and does not factor in any chronic absenteeism or anything like that. That number for each school was simply multiplied by the number of collisions that were surrounding that school. And the reason why we used those two criteria, and only those two criteria, was because we wanted to target every single school in the city, public or private, and certainly we did that over the years. And while certainly equity and other types of concerns were balanced, the key concern 10 years ago, as it remains today, was if a child or a person is hit, they're hit. It didn't really matter if they were low income or anything like that. It's just simply a matter of locations of greatest need. And I'm happy to see 10 years later that we've touched basically every single school, and that this program is an evolution of that, which is to piggyback on our ongoing success. So just wanted to point that out to the committee.
Thank you for your comment. If there's no additional comment in the room, let me check for remote public comment.
Checking for public comments. There is no remote public comment.
Great, the public comment on this item is closed. Is there, can I get a motion and a second to approve this item? Moved by member Rosales. Second by member Ortega. Can we get a roll call vote?
On the motion to approve item 8, member Bars absent. Member Chen,
I.
Vice Chair Daniels absent. Member Davidson, I. Member Ford, I. Member Kim,
I.
Member Levine,
Levine, I.
I. Member Margarita,
I.
I. Member Milford Rosales, I. Member Ortega, I. Chair
Siegel, I.
Chair, we have 9 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you all so much for the presentation. That puts us on item 9, which is to adopt a motion of support to adopt the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget and work program. And this is an action item. And Lily, you, finance manager, is here to present this item. Oh, Cynthia Fong is here to present this item.
Thank you, Chair Siegel. Yes, I'm not here as a special guest tonight. Normally you would see Lily here before you. You do remember Lily was here with the preliminary fiscal year 24-25 budget amendment. I'm happy to report that there are no changes. I'll recap the numbers for you all just in case you forgot. We are estimating total revenues of $193.3 million for fiscal year 24-25. We're anticipating to spend approximately $266.9 million of expenditures, mainly for capital projects, which represents about $228 million. And the difference between revenues and expenditures would be anticipated to be funded with multiple drawdowns from our $125 million revolving credit loan agreement with US Bank. I'm happy to go into details into the full presentation if you'd like, and I'm also happy to just take questions you may have.
Do any members have questions or comments or want additional details on this item? Not seeing any. Great, then we can take public comment. Is there any public comment in the room on item 9? Seeing any, is there any remote public comment?
Checking for remote public comment on item 9. Hi, caller. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you and good evening. This is Roland. The only thing I'd like to mention is something I touched on the general public comment of the board meeting yesterday. I think this would be a good time to revisit the annual contribution to Caltrain operations, which used to run at about $5 million by a county or $15 million altogether. And this disappeared right after the passage of Measure RR, because an individual who shall remain nameless and fortunately is no longer with the agency, opined that after the passage of Measure RR, an earlier measure, which was passed in 2000, known as 2000 Measure A, no longer had to contribute to Caltrain operations. So I respectfully requested that Supervisor Walton, who is a director on the Caltrain board, reach out to his peers and see if it would be possible to revisit this issue. And I hope that you as the CAC will consider supporting this suggestion and reach out to your supervisors accordingly. Thank you.
there any additional public comment? Great, can I get a motion and a second to approve item 9? Member Levine. Seconded by Milford Rosales. If there's no objection, I think we can take that same house, same call. Yes, okay, great. Then item 9 is approved. Thank you so much. That puts us on item 10, which is to adopt a motion of support to approve revised administrative code, debt and fiscal policies, and ratified investment policy. And this is an action item. And we have Cynthia Fong here again, Deputy Director for Finance and Administration, to present this item.
Thank you again. All right, so we have a pure administrative item right before you. It is great to periodically review the TA's authorizing, or not authorizing, but TA general policies. Like Chair Siegel said, we have debt policies, investment policy, fiscal policy, and an administrative code. We are making recommended changes to some of these policies just to ensure compliance with state statutes. We're also updating our policies for changes that have recently happened within the agency. Well, I guess I'll just start from top to bottom. The policy with the most changes is our debt policy. We have about 6 changes here, and they are mainly related to providing clarification and flexibility in obtaining cost-effective financing structures. You'll see there's a red line version included in your packet or on your electronic versions. It details every change we're making to the policies, in addition to a summary of why we're making these changes. The next policy with the most changes is our fiscal policy. We are making changes related to the recent passing of Prop L, in addition to our accepting a new role as our TNC administrator, in addition to aligning the policy with our procurement policy that was updated sometime last year. There's a change of change to a reference of $75,000, where the executive director can enter into contracts for emergency costs. And now we are changing that to $100,000, so it's in line with our agency procurement policy. Next, we have our administrative code, as recommended by and requested by Chair Mandelman. He has asked us to incorporate clearer policies and processes into the formation of CAC subcommittees. We have now added those statements and processes and procedures. We're ensuring there's alignment to our work program, in addition to ensuring that there are staff resources to help with the formation of a CAC subcommittee. And last item I have is our investment policy. We are looking to recommend a ratification to this policy. There are no changes to these policies. They are good as is. We also are in compliance with reviewing the debt and investment policy on an annual basis. And the other 2 policies are just brought to you before as good management practice to ensure that we are current and up to date with everything. I am happy to answer any questions on these policies. There are about 30 pages of recommended changes here. Happy to look at the summary, happy to look at each individual item.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments on this item? I was just curious, I don't believe there are still any active subcommittees, or are there still some active subcommittees that would they be impacted by the changes, or I don't think there are. Yeah, okay. All right. Great. Is there any public comment on item 10? Not seeing any in the room. Is there any remote public comment on item 10?
For remote public comment on item 10. And there's.
Great. Can I get a motion and a second to approve item 10? Moved by Member Ford, seconded by Member Ortega. And I think we can also take that same house, same call without objection. Wonderful. Item 10 is approved. Thank you so much for both presentations. That puts us on item 11, which is Senate Bill 1031, Connect Bay Area Act, and this is an information/action item. And Martin Reyes, Principal Transportation Planner, is here to present.
Good evening, Chair Siegel and members of the CAC. My name is Martin Reyes. I'm a Principal Transportation Planner for the Transportation Authority. This evening, I will be providing a presentation on Senate Bill 1031. I'll start with a quick overview of the bill, discuss the amendments that have been made over the last couple of weeks, the current language in the bill regarding highways, and share some policy perspectives contained in the city's transportation element. So we'll start with a quick recap of what Senate Bill 1031 is. It's a bill introduced by Senators Wiener and Wahab, and it's a complicated bill. It's really 4 bills in one, but for our purposes this evening, talking about highway language, it's really the first component that is most important. The bill is primarily intended to authorize MTC to bring forth a regional revenue measure for the Bay Area with various revenue mechanisms. And that revenue measure can also be put on the ballot by voters. This could happen as soon as 2026. Last week, there were a couple of rounds of amendments that were released. On May 13, the first round of amendments was incorporated on May 13, and these are the less significant ones, but they still have a major impact on the bill. In short, these amendments limit the timing and revenue potential of a measure, and in particular, sales taxes are capped at a cumulative total of 0.5%, which, if all 9 counties participated in the sales tax measure, would generate about $1 billion a year. On May 16, the second round of amendments were introduced, and these are very significantly impactful to the bill. The first bullet that you see here would increase return to source levels from 70% to 90% in the 6th year of a measure. And with a 90% return to source level, MTC would have insufficient funding to fully address the region's transit fiscal cliff, which was the original intent behind introducing this bill to begin with. The bill now also prohibits Marin and Sonoma County from participating in a measure before November 2028. And it also requires a revenue measure to set aside $50 million annually for Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit, or SMART for short, to fund their operations and capital in the case that SMART is unable to reauthorize their existing quarter-cent sales tax, which is expected to expire in 2029. The bill also requires county transportation authorities to approve any expenditure plans for a measure and directs connectivity program funding directly to county transportation authorities. The connectivity category section in the bill is actually the section where the current highway placeholder language is located, and MTC has repeatedly said that this is placeholder language and they intend on bringing forth more specific language to replace this. But right now, the current language says that eligible investments shall include highway, transit, and rail mobility projects that close gaps and relieve bottlenecks in the existing transportation network in a climate neutral manner. Before we go to discussion, we also wanted to briefly discuss what existing policies are currently guiding San Francisco transportation projects related to highway capacity. So this, what you see on the screen in front of you is policy 3.1 from the City and County San Francisco transportation element, which is part of the general plan. And it says the existing capacity of the bridges, highways, and freeways entering the city should not be increased for single occupant vehicles and should be reduced where possible. And there is one more policy in the same transportation element, and that is policy 19.3. The existing single occupant vehicular capacity of the bridges, highways, and freeways entering the city should not be increased and should be reduced if needed to increase the capacity for high occupancy vehicles, transit, and other alternative means of commuting, and for the safe and efficient movement of freight trucks. I also wanted to quickly share, before we go to discussion, some of what we've heard from various stakeholders on highway capacity projects. So we have heard significant feedback from advocates and nonprofits that 1031 funding should not fund any highway widening or capacity project of any kind. County transportation authorities have also had significant discussions on this, and in general, they are supportive of 1031 only funding certain kinds of highway projects such as express lanes or interchange projects. MTC commissioners have also discussed this at length, including at their two-day workshop a few weeks back. And they also agree that generally support 1031 funding only certain kinds of highway projects, such as SR 37 in the North Bay and certain kinds of express lanes projects, although they have not taken any formal action on this. And to clarify, it is not unanimous, but there are commissioners that generally support that. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. We're happy to answer any questions, and we're also here, if the committee decides to take action tonight on this item, we are also here to help provide some guidance on what kind of actions you can take.
Great, thank you so much. Member Ford.
Good point of clarification. Did you say that State Route 37 would qualify for this funding?
So some MTC commissioners have indicated support for 1031 being able to fund SR 37. From a climate resilience perspective, some commissioners felt like it was a priority to be funded here. And some advocates as well.
We need more mics.
Yeah. But to be clear, there isn't any, up until these amendments that came out last week, there haven't been any specific projects that were named in the bill. These have all really been discussions either at MTC meetings or offline.
Just to remind me, what is MTC?
I'm sorry about that. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So they are the sponsors of Senate Bill 1031. And they have been providing a lot of, they have been collaborating with the bill authors on the language that has been incorporated so far, although they are not necessarily in complete control over what language goes into the bill.
And sorry, that may not be clear for many. MTC is like a state plan fund where they deliver, but for the 9 Bay Area counties and the bill that Martin's talking about would give MTC the ability to put this revenue measure on the ballot. So they would be administering it according to the law.
Okay, another just clarification question. Sure. Marin and Sonoma County are not allowed to vote, but they are allowed to have the money? What is this?
Yeah, no, I can clarify. So SMART has an existing quarter-cent sales tax that funds most of their operations and capital program right now. Right now, it generates about $50 million a year. That will expire in 2029. So they, Marin and Sonoma counties have been in talks about attempting to reauthorize that quarter-cent sales tax. They have brought up concerns about if a regional measure moves forward around the same time, that these two measures, the reauthorization and the new regional revenue measure, if they come on a ballot at the same time, that they would compete with each other and potentially reduce chances of passage. So what has been negotiated at the legislature is that Marin and Sonoma cannot participate in a regional measure before 2028. And that would give Marin and Sonoma a chance to reauthorize without a competing measure on their ballots. Now, if they are unable to reauthorize starting in 2028, they can be included in a measure. However, the bill would also then include $50 million to fund SMART since they were not able to reauthorize their quarter-cent sales tax. So it's a way of sort of backfilling what they were unable to reauthorize through the regional measure.
But if they're not let's say the measure hits the ballot in 2027, we've passed it. Money to Marin and Sonoma to widen Route 37 highway. Am I understanding this bill correctly?
That's a good question. If it passes in 2027, I believe the answer is yes.
Let's check that.
Yeah. Yeah, we will have to get back to you on that. If it gets authorized in 2027, whether it would still need, whether a $50 million set aside would still happen.
I'm actually more concerned about paying for Route 37, but yeah, same. Money's fungible and all that.
And 37 is not technically in the bill right now. It's more in discussions.
Okay, I'll yield for now.
Member Ortega?
I also just have some clarifying points on the language. I just didn't quite understand. You made a point earlier that it was like return from 90% to 60%, or
yes,
60% to 90% or something in 6 years, and how we wouldn't be able to do that. And could you expand on what that even means?
Yes.
I guess for year of measure, that language is just very confusing, and I don't understand why that 20% could suddenly cause a huge problem, other than it's an increase of 20%, right? The 20% of what?
Yes, it's a great question. So return to source is a expression used in this measure to describe how much revenues each county is receiving as a proportion of how much each county is generating. So for example, if a county generates about $100 million a year in sales tax, 70% return to source means that they get $70 million worth of projects or services every year. So at a high level, that's what the concept means. The revenue measure is intended to fund transit, or primarily intended to fund transit and address the transit fiscal cliff. And it does so by pooling funding from across the up to 9 counties, if there were a 9-county regional measure, and then allocating a large proportion of that to transit. Now, because there are some significant transit shortfalls to cover for certain transit agencies like BART, for example, that means that not every county is going to see the same level of return to source or benefit to that county. So ensuring 70% return to source is something that MTC felt that they could comfortably do, while also still providing enough funding to transit agencies like BART, AC Transit, and Muni in order to make them whole. But once it goes up to 90%, it gets much more difficult to do that, and essentially there would still be a significant transit operating shortfall left over in a 90% return to source scenario. And that's mainly because MTC would be trying to direct more funding directly to counties as opposed to directing it to transit agencies. So
I think you did a great job. It is super complicated. You don't want to see the spreadsheets behind this, but Martin's explanation is really good. There's one thing I would add to it is the idea and hope of this measure, if our legislation and subsequent measures, if they happen, is to temporarily stabilize transit by backfilling the fiscal cliff, but meanwhile, fix it, make it attractive and work better, more customer facing, so people come back to transit, and that over time, the deficit will shrink and their revenues will improve. And then more of that money will be available to direct to the other programs that Martin talked about. However, these are uncharted territories where we are, right, post-pandemic with this big changes in work from home. We don't know that things will be great in 5 years. So the way the bill was written before, the amendments that Martin described gave MTC the ability to basically annually check on the status of the operators, see how they are doing. And if they're doing better, release that money back to other purposes in the measure. This one just says by year 6, boom, it's gone. Does that help a little bit?
Well, that definitely helps me a lot. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And then the other thing I just wanted to clarify here was, I can't read my own handwriting now. You mentioned chapter 4 or chapter 9, carbon neutral directions, and I was just, that's good. Thank you. You said a climate neutral manner, and I was curious what meant in comparison to our other legislation in San Francisco. I just found that phrase very interesting, and I wanted to understand what that could imply or mean in the future.
It's a great question. I don't think there's necessarily been a definition developed by MTC, mainly because this is intended to be placeholder language and it wasn't intended to be the final language. I could make a guess, but I would probably rather just leave it as we're not exactly sure what MTC had in mind, behind this language.
I'm not afraid to guess this. That's okay, but so similar, if you're a little bit familiar with CEQA and environmental law, right? If you look at a project's impacts, you can propose strategies or other projects or ways to mitigate those impacts. And I think that was what was proposed here. Like if there were some project in a connectivity category that increased, say, greenhouse gas emissions, if you did something else like fund more bus service or something, or give out e-bikes that mitigated that, that would be considered net as a package, climate neutral. I think that's what they were going for.
Oh, okay.
Just like you would do in CEQA or NEPA environmental law.
Thank you. Those are my clarification questions on one of the census pieces of things I've read in a while.
Member Davidson.
Hi, thank you. I'm looking at the text embedded in the agenda documents around the commuter benefit ordinance piece. And so this is more of a comment, but there's a lot of talk about supporting walking, cycling, and transit. But when I read this commuter benefit ordinance, the cycling component is always given a lower dollar amount. And it always requires the agency or the employer to choose. They can't choose funding transit and bicycles. They have to make a or ban pools. And I think if we really care about taking vehicles off the street, single occupancy vehicles off the street, then we need to at least equally prioritize all of them and give employers the option to fund all of them. And it's a personal beef of mine that, it creates these false choices and this false hierarchy when the lip service that we pay is, okay, we need to prioritize the most vulnerable users on the road, yet we're not going to give them the dollar support that's needed to do that.
That's actually a great point, Member Davidson. This is something that we brought up too. And for those that aren't familiar with the language, there is an existing transportation demand management ordinance for the Bay Area that requires certain employers of a certain size, I think it's over 50 employees, to choose an option from a menu on how to encourage their employees to take sustainable modes of travel. One of the ways they can comply with the ordinance is by helping to subsidize travel by bike. And the dollar amount in the current ordinance is very low. And something we've discussed internally is advocating for that amount to be raised. So that you hit on the exact point we've spoken about too.
So what can we do here today to make that point clearer?
That is definitely something you can adopt a position on. You can support increasing the subsidy for traveling by bike under the Transportation Demand Management Ordinance, and ask that we seek that amendment.
I want to do that.
And we have, just so you know, we have made this comment actually to MTC, and we'd be happy to continue raising this and elevating as much as possible.
Great, well then, let's use whatever power to force that conversation. So do I create that motion now? No, later.
Right, that's actually good segue, Member Davidson. You've and I don't know that the conversation is done, but you could certainly make that motion, or you could keep doing the conversation. If you were to make the motion and people came up with other things that the CAC wanted to support, you might be willing to accept the amendment to your motion if I want.
So I'd like to make a motion to. Please help me.
You can say, support seeking an amendment to the transportation demand management ordinance language to increase the subsidy for travel by bike.
I'd like to make an amendment to support the travel demand management increase to more than $20.
More than whatever
More
it is.
than whatever, to make it equal at least, if not more, for bicycle transportation. You said it far more eloquently, but I think you got the gist.
Yeah, we'll keep wordsmith it for you.
Okay.
I will just for context, we did check that number, it's pinned up, matches the federal level. We do know that we can go higher, so that's no problem.
Go
And
higher.
we could, I will just note the transit number is indexed to inflation. We could do the same, or the
Yes.
CAC could do the same for
Yes.
bicycles.
I want it to go high. And I want it to be indexed to inflation. It's like $20 right now, and for Vancouver Transit, it's like 75. Yeah, and they have to choose. So you do either or, it's really, here's, okay. Yes, so I'd like to adopt that motion.
Make a motion.
Make a motion.
Oh, do we have to act on that motion before we, okay, we can continue the discussion. Okay, member Ford.
Okay, so I guess I have a couple of thoughts on this one. One, I was recently asked to return to the office the majority of the time by my major employer with more than 50 people within a distance of a transit stop, which is all really interesting with commuter benefits, and I take the tech shuttle to get there. And the reason I don't bicycle is because bicycle network planning between counties, my employer is in San Mateo County, it really is terrible. Like you just like cannot get out of San Francisco County and head south, unless you hug the Bay Trail. I'm from District 4. I'm not riding to the Bay Trail on a bike. And then going 30 miles south. So I am wondering if this bill includes, as part of the connecting the Bay Area, any consideration for inter-county safe class 4 bike network considerations. Pause there.
In short, yes. So there is active transportation is an eligible use of 1031 funding under certain funding categories. The Safe Streets funding category, for example, that is a direct that goes directly to counties for use on various kinds of projects, including active transportation. To your question about inter-county projects, I don't think there's anything that addresses inter-county active transportation projects specifically, but there's nothing limiting it either. So it would be up to the counties to work on that together.
Okay, and then so this like return to source information again, just sort of like hammer on this a little bit. If I understand this sausage making bill was originally a fiscal cliff attempt.
Primarily, and in support of transit transformation and other transportation projects, but yes.
And it's being implemented through the MTC, a commission made up mostly of suburban, geographically elected and appointed commissioners. Don't ride transit. Like, what I guess is it like, is the MTC the only vehicle for transit funding? Like it, or could it just actually be transit funding and not transportation funding?
Yes, in short, it does not, MTC is not the only one that they could introduce a bill to raise revenues for, essentially. Transit districts are also, and transit districts and similar agencies, they're also able to raise revenues if they have that authority. A couple years back, Caltrain had their own measure to raise funding in the counties they serve, specifically just for Caltrain. So this is not the only way to raise revenues for transit funding. There are other ways as well. I think the idea behind MTC doing it was because they represent the 9 counties in the Bay Area, and because they are trying to foster more seamless mobility across the Bay Area, that they might be the appropriate body to do this, but they are not necessarily the only ones that can raise revenues for the Bay Area. I hope that helps, but I'm happy to delve into more detail if you like.
I think. Get it? Yeah. I don't know that there's any more I can do for this. Yeah.
Member Margarita?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? Hello? Okay, there we go. So thank you so much, Martin Reyes, for your explanation. Thank you, Maria, for adding on as well. Just wanted to emphasize, I read through it, and I appreciate the organization behind it to kind of like have different counties talk together so that we can stabilize transit and bring more revenue into the different transit systems. Like things that excite me are like being able to take BART from here to Las Pulgas in San Jose, right? So that like something that I enjoy. And also to try and shrink the deficit on the different transportation systems in City and County San Francisco and also in the Bay Area. So can you talk a little bit more about, just so that all of the members can understand what this would mean for transportation services like BART? If something like this doesn't get passed, what does this mean for the current services that we have of public transportation? Like, will they still be? Like, how dire is the deficit, and how badly do we need this to stabilize the transportation system in San Francisco and in the Bay Area? Thank you.
It's a great question. So to give context, a lot of the transit agencies in the Bay Area have been struggling to recover since the pandemic. And MTC has tried to calculate what that means in terms of dollars in a standardized way. So they estimate transit operators will face total shortfalls across the Bay Area between $600 and $750 million per year starting in the next few years. So unless those shortfalls are addressed, it could mean things like transit service cuts. Transit agencies and counties are still able to come up with their own plans to avoid that, but at its base, that's what it may mean for the Bay Area.
That's like the $1 billion+ question. Margarita, we actually have been talking in parallel with BART and Uni and the Gates Transit that carry the lion's share of the ridership about this doesn't happen, or if it doesn't happen in 2026, what's the backup plan? So we don't have these devastating service cuts. And I will just note that they're all thinking about them. But it is easier for an operator like the MTA that has buses and it's multimodal, we have great land use to shrink or reduce services if we have to and save funding, than BART, which just has the rail. Explain it very well, but the relative proportion of money that they save for cutting service isn't saving them as much money as you might think. Especially now with ridership being so much lower, and they're worried if the service is cut so much that the frequency is very far apart, and it's like this right bad circle, because nobody's gonna wanna ride it, so you really have to. So we don't know, but we are actively following up on that. And as a quick sidebar, just what Chair Siegel said during her remarks, we are just delighted, very happy that the governor's budget proposal is restoring the bridge money that is keeping transit afloat right now while we're trying to sort this out at the state level. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, the chair. I'm pretty confident I can answer the smart question here, which is that it's a little complicated, but so your question was basically could get both best of both worlds, not participate in a measure and still get paid. It looks like in order for Marin and Sonoma to get the automatic 50 million off the top, they have to have participated in the election. So even yeah, so that's good.
So to quickly follow up to that, if they don't participate in the election, they're not eligible for any funds. Okay, that makes sense. Is there any restriction on the amount of funds that would be eligible for highway capacity projects, or can all funds that go to a particular, that are allocated to a particular county be used for that?
So there isn't, the language that you see in front of you is pretty much the only language that guides how funding can be used around highway capacity projects. Beyond this, it would likely, let's say if this language is a language to move forward, much of the actual eligibility criteria would get hashed out in an expenditure plan. So with only this, it's sort of a little bit hard to answer the question. Yeah, and this connectivity bucket is 15% of the total revenue measure. So it is a smaller portion of the overall revenue measure.
I see, so the other 85% would, what would that be for?
So there's 45% that goes towards transit, and that includes both transit operations and transit transformation. There is 15% flex category, and that can be used for a few different things, helping to meet minimum return to source levels, and it can also be used towards transit. And then the remainder, I believe is that 25%. The remainder of it goes to safe streets, and that's the money that goes directly to counties for things like active transportation and street resurfacing and other kinds of projects.
Okay, so 45% transit, 15% flex, 15% this category.
Connectivity, yes.
Connectivity, and 25% safe streets. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? Member Milford Rosales.
Yeah. Sorry, so just to clarify, we have 45% that's guaranteed for transit out of this bucket, or out of this total amount of money. But the support connectivity is pretty vague. It's all placeholder language, and the placeholder includes highway in it. The flex, a significant amount of that could end up being return to source funding, in which case that would likely not go to transit. The active transfer, the safe streets includes resurfacing projects as well, which may not actually include, which I guess depending on the project, we don't know if that will actually include new infrastructure versus just resurfacing the street as it is right now. So is this all as of the second round of amendments, basically, that we're looking at a minority of the money in the transit bailout bill actually being guaranteed to go to transit? Or am I exaggerating that?
I think you're right in the the fact that less money is dedicated directly to transit in this iteration of the bill than the previous.
Okay, thank you. I remembered an older presentation and was not remember this.
If there are no other questions or comments, we can take public comment on this item.
Thank you, Edward Mason. I'm disappointed to see that there's no regional express bus system included in this legislation. In the past, we had Greyhound. You'd go down to 7th and Market and get on the Greyhound bus, and you could go anywhere from here to Santa Cruz and regionally to Santa Rosa and Concord and every place else. Of course, BART took that over, but it was convenient because you had a lot of intermediate stops that you could make. There's nothing in here that I can see that addresses where are all of the cars going from. In other words, you either use cell phone technology to figure out cars are beginning at point A and winding up at point B, or you do license plate readers and back that down to a zip code. So, you know, I'm just trying to figure out everything that we're doing on this is, well, you're going to go to the borderline of where one transit agency is, and then you're going to board another bus to go to continue your trip. You really need a regional express bus system, which has been diminished by the corporate commuter bus system, because the regional express bus system was studied over a decade ago, and with the advent of commuter buses, that requirement fell apart and went away. So I think we need to revisit a regional express bus system that would serve all the people, because a lot of times, you know, you have people driving to a BART station. Well, maybe if you had a regional express bus system that was intermediate someplace and develop that, it'd be a lot better off and encourage people to utilize transit. So I guess my time is up.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Checking for remote public comments. Hi, Roland, go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity. So first of all, MTC is known as a metropolitan planning organization, or an MPO. They're in charge of planning for the entire Bay Area, and they fund a large amount of federal funding. That's where the money comes from. They're also responsible for collecting the bridge tolls. But I want to backtrack a little bit on 1031. This started out as two separate bills. There was the Wiener bill, which basically carried on, trying to save Muni, initially to bridge tolls. And then Senator Warhouse introduced another bill, which has more to do with consolidation. And the Senate asked them that they consolidate both bills together, hence Senate Bill 1031. That's when the entire thing started falling apart, because everybody pretty much agrees on not consolidation, but coordination, and nobody's agreeing on funding. So you can watch the commission this morning. Basically, it was a disaster. It's going to the BART vote tomorrow morning. You can look at slide 8 for item 11A. They're all over the map. So I'm going to wrap up here and just share with you what my take on this is. The time has come to go back to where we started and bifurcate the coordination, conciliation, whatever, and the funding that nobody can agree on. My recommendation on the funding for the TA is pretty much do what Sonoma County want to do, is to go back with the idea of putting a sales tax measure purely for Muni. And you may recall that 2-3 years ago, I pointed out to Supervisor Mandelman that there might be a conflict with the future transportation measure, and we all know this is not going anyway. So let's please revisit this. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. There's no more public comment.
Great, then public comment on item 11 is closed. I would like to propose an amendment to Member Davidson's motion that recommends against any eligibility for highway related projects as part of this bill.
I mean, Chair Singo, is there a way you could narrow in and describe that a little bit? For instance, just in the groups talking about this at the MTC level, under the highway would fall like interchange improvements and other things.
Yeah, so are you asking? I would like to make it broad to like exclude, yeah, interchanges, express lanes, just, yeah, highway related projects generally that, yeah.
To be clear, I'm not trying to persuade you one way or another, but there are lots of people say words and they can mean a lot of different things. So just other projects that Martin spoke to that can fall under there. Some of the interchange improvements are just for safety or to ease a bottleneck. There are spot improvements, maybe, like Carl Holmes was here talking about with the Geneva ramp, which was about lengthening the off ramp on the freeway at the Geneva off ramp, getting vehicles off the mainline freeway, moving them over to the side to prevent rear end collisions. So I guess what I'm getting is just clarifying, just flat out highway, or is it capacity or EMT increasing projects, or whatever's your pleasure?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly widening or VMT related projects. I mean, I'm a little confused because the language says that it would only be eligible for climate neutral highway projects, but there's not really like any explanation of how that would be measured, so I don't have a lot of confidence in that. Would any of the projects you described not be eligible for any other kind of funding? My understanding is that there are other funding sources for those kinds of projects generally.
And there are other kinds of funding sources that fund highways, both at the state and federal level, and MTC has funding as well. There are different kinds of funds for different kinds of highway projects. And at the local level.
Yeah, so my proposed amendment would be to recommend against any highway related projects. Just because there are so few sources for transit operations funding, that would be my proposal.
That's right, and I just wanted to check, Chair Siegel, if you're making that as a friendly amendment to Member Davidson's, do you accept the friendly amendment?
I accept.
So then, Chair, unless you want to see if anyone else has any other additions, you can move on to a second when you're ready.
Are there any other proposed additions? Not seeing any, then, yeah, is there a second? Member Milford Rosales? Second, okay, can we take a roll call vote if there are no other proposals?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm going to paraphrase. So the motion is that you're voting on is to seek amendments to amend the TDM, Transportation Demand Management language, to increase the subsidy for traveling by bike. We'll wordsmith this, Member Davidson, beyond 20 years to be more equal with the other modes and index it to inflation. Yes, amendments to disallow any highway improvement projects in the legislation. And again, if you like, Chair, I can add because there are other funding sources available for that.
Yeah, I think that would be great, yeah, to
We'll
give
make that
some
sound
more,
nicer.
yeah, context.
You can just say on the motion.
Okay. On the motion, made by member Davidson and seconded by member Milford Rosales. Member Bars is absent. Member Chen.
Chen,
I. Vice Chair Daniels absent. Member Davidson.
Davidson, I.
Davidson, I. Member Ford.
Ford, I.
Ford, I. Member Kim. Kim absent. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, I. Member Margarita. Margarita, I. Margarita, I. Member Milford Rosales.
Milford Rosales, aye.
Milford Rosales, I. Member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, I.
Siegel, I. Chair, we have 8 ayes. The motion is approved.
Great, thank you so much for the discussion and all the explanations of this complicated bill, really appreciate it. That puts us on item 12, which is introduction of new business. Do any members have any new business? Member Levine.
Oh. Yes, I'm on my way over here tonight, which was about a 3-mile ride. I counted 11 autonomous vehicles on the road, and it seems to be, and I don't know whether it's because I'm noticing them more, but they seem to be the most prevalent type of vehicle on the road in San Francisco these days. I would like to get a report about the number of vehicles now on the road and number of autonomous vehicles now on the road in San Francisco, and also a full report on accidents and citations issued in the past year in San Francisco on these vehicles. Thank you. Just as a comment, it seems to be at this point that they are creating more congestion than they are relieving it. So thank you.
Any other members have any new business? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Yes, I agree with the observation. Have you ever seen an autonomous vehicle parked at the curb? And I've never seen one parked at the curb.
We gotta come out to the sunset.
Do they park out there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sounds like they're always on the road, so.
Because I've read where in the Wayback Machine, when these things are first coming out, they were forecasting that these vehicles would take people to work. And then it was cheaper to operate the vehicle than it was to park it for the day and pay the parking fees. It was cheaper to run it all day, and then they would be contributing to the congestion. But I agree, I saw one today, went around the block, literally, came up Church Street to 24th, did a right turn, did another right turn at Chattanooga, then did a right turn on Jersey, and then went around again and came by, and then went straight ahead. So I don't know what the around the block was for, but it was doing it. So I agree that regionally it's a problem, because the next thing we know, they're in the San Mateo County, and San Mateo is apprehensive about it, as well as Santa Clara County. So I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
For remote public comments. Hi, Roland, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. The only comment I got to make about autonomous vehicles is please mark your calendars for August the 8th, which is the day where Tesla will announce the basically arrival and joining the party. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no more public comment.
Great, that puts us on item 13, which is public comment. This is general public comment on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give general public comment? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment?
Go ahead.
So what I would like to do is to attract your attention. Basically, this is going to answer a lot of the questions that you had about what MTC does and what are the sources of funding we have out there for transit that you may not know about. MTC just had a workshop last April. You can find it on their website. It is very, very unfortunate that they didn't have a video. It's only an audio recording. But a good place to start, it was a 2-day workshop, and there's a slide decks and attachment on both days. And I'm gonna touch on a couple of things. The first thing that they highlighted is that currently they have got $227 million allocated to VTA for COVID relief funds, known as a CARES Act funding. And the reason it's sitting there, there's absolutely no way that VTA ever going to need that money. So what are you going to do with it? Return it back to the Fed? I hope not. The thing that struck me is that none of the commissioners caught on to them, even though it was presented to them on a couple of slides. But I'm going to wrap up with, I don't remember what slide deck it was, but it's slide number 6. It's a slide called Near-Term Transit Operation Shortfall, which basically shows you all the respective agencies' fiscal cliffs. BART is $258 million a year. Muni is $218 million a year. But there are 3 agencies where the deficit is 0. And the major failing of that slide is that it doesn't show operating surpluses. VTA right now have got an $80 million operating surplus. They just grabbed 57 million of that to support the light rail capital project, which is $120 million in the hole. You need to get onto that, alert your supervisors, do something about it. Thank you.
There is no more public comment.
Great, public comment is closed, and that puts us on item 14, which is adjournment. Thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned.